Well, Natalie, Jeff, thank you, and let me try and interpret this as best I can. I think usually in this building, we design budgets to get us through the next election. And I think you've heard Natalie and Jeff try and describe a budget that's built to last, a budget that is good through the foreseeable future and is strong even in the case of a recession, which is probably on the horizon. I wanted to do this now because we've had a chance to start digesting the end of 2022 fiscal year and take a look at where we are right now. As you maybe know, the employment numbers come out tomorrow. There'll be an early indication of how strong the economy is, or is there a slight slowing as represented by employment numbers. And then you're going to see the inflation numbers come out, I believe it is on Wednesday, so I thought this was timely. Natalie and the Comptroller's Office really has prime responsibility for our long-term fixed costs. And as you look, over the last 30 years, our fixed costs have been growing, accelerating, eating up more and more of the operating expenses, eating up more and more of our budget. Previous administrations just added to the credit card debt and hoped that somebody else would pay that off. It was like a game of Pac-Man. They were just eating up more and more of the budget. We have a long way to go, but we've begun bending that curve, and I think that's really important. As Natalie described, significant pay down of our pension obligations over the last 3 years, in particular this year. What that means is our pensions are now more solvent than they've ever been in the history of the state. We have a long way to go. Maybe we're on average about 50% solvent, a little less on the state employee side, a lot more on the teacher side. But what that means is significant savings for the taxpayers in the out years, starting with $400 million next year, and then accelerating over a period of time. And it also means that we keep our word to our state employees. We made a deal, and we keep our word. And no more of this talk about tearing up contracts and bankruptcy, and we can't do it. We're honoring our commitment. I think that's what that means. Secondly, as Natalie said, going out, renegotiated our retiree health care costs, representing about $150 million in savings guaranteed for the next 3 years, and hopefully we'll be able to compound that in years to come. And finally, the third piece of fixed costs is bonded debt. That was going up. Now we've begun to flatten that curve, so that's no longer a bigger piece of our budget, but we are watching that carefully. I think that makes us in a much better position to handle what could be a downturn end of this year, early next year. And finally, just as Jeff said, taking a hard look at our operating budget, it's a pretty conservative budget. What he was saying was, look, usually you estimate revenues that trees are going to grow to the sky and it'll just keep on growing, and then sometime after the election, people are surprised and we have to recalibrate and talk about tax increases or spending cuts, and I don't think that's where the state's going to be, even in the face of a recession. It's not going to be that way because of the savings we got on the fixed side. And look, I'll be blunt. Jeff and OPM were very conservative in their revenue assumptions. Our revenues can be very volatile. You look like a hero when Wall Street's going great, but you don't look so good in other times. Right now, we've estimated that our capital gains is going to go down by 13 or 14%. He said the same thing on, sort of the LLCs and what that means. Very conservative assumptions on sales tax. So far, those numbers, 7 days into this new, fiscal year, are holding up okay. Right now, the consumer still has spending strength. We haven't seen a dip in sales tax right now. My hunch is you'll see more of a dip when it comes to capital gains and the other side of that. So what I wanted to do was make sure that taxpayers had some confidence that we had a budget that was built to last, not just for the near term, but at least into the foreseeable future. I wanted folks who count on the revenues, count on education funding, count on child care, count on mental health, to know that we've got a budget that is projected to be able to maintain our commitments there without any cuts for the next 2 or 3 years. And that was sort of a message we wanted to live. It's very different than where this state has been over the last 30 years. And I think rating agencies have begun to notice that. I think businesses that have had some doubts about our fiscal rectitude as a state are taking a second look at Connecticut right now. And that was the news we wanted to give you today. Thank you.
Could we, I was wondering, where do we stand in terms of the unfunded liabilities in the two pension funds, CSRS and TRS?
So the total unfunded liability amount today is about 40 billion for both combined.
And what is the bonded indebtedness?
I think we are another 40 or so, 27 for bonded indebtedness. There's some other.
27? And
Yes.
what about OPEB?
OPEB number is 23.
22.
Deferring to my colleagues here.
Sure. And what is the latest projection for, based on fixed costs? And what's the latest deficit projection or budget gap projection for FY 2024?
We gave information to the rating agencies last month that our current projection is about 800 million in 24. We think that's the structural deficit today. If you'd asked me that a year ago, I would have said 1.2 billion. So it's getting better all the time. We have a lot of tools in our toolbox. We will be addressing that. I'll also point out that in the current fiscal year, we had programmed about 500 million, almost $600 million in ARPA funds for revenue replacement. As the revenue came in better, we were able to push that off and didn't use any of that. So we programmed about 300 million for balance in the current year. For all I know, the revenues could come in better again, and that might push that off. So that out year number will change. It could get better.
Well, it could change it if you do your updates
And
in years.
if it doesn't get better, we'll have recommendations to the governor on how to get there. We always balance our budget.
Thank you.
I'd just add on that, Paul, because state budgeting is likes of which I've never seen in my life. But with the volatility stipulations, we actually have stronger cash flow than that. If you want to see where we are on a cash flow basis, we've got a couple of billion that under the volatility has to go, not to pay operating expenses, but has to go to, paying down debt or the rainy day fund. So we actually have, from a cash flow point of view, much stronger over the next 2 years.
Governor, what can you say to folks who might be watching this today and they think, okay, great, you guys have us on a steady path. However, I'm still struggling at home with my grocery bill, my gas bill. The cars are now valued higher, so that tax cut isn't really turning out to be what they wanted. And they seem as though they have to jump through hoops to get the child tax credit. How can you give them hope?
Well, first of all, Jody, you're right. Candidates and people in this building have spent the rainy day fund 4 times over. They wanted to pay operating expenses, they wanted to pay transportation, they wanted to pay for tax cuts. I think you've heard from, Natalie and Jeff, they should have a great deal of confidence that what we've got is a budget that allows them predictability, stability. They know what they can expect going forward. You're right, we have significant tax cuts that are available to folks starting, this month. And we got to do a better job when it comes to, say, for example, you mentioned the child tax credit. Getting, maybe less than half the people eligible for what could be $500, $750 in your pocket in August have not yet applied for that. So we're doing significant outreach right now, probably going to be doing some things in social media and TV and not-for-profit groups, making sure they don't leave any of that money on the table.
Do you know why it wasn't decided to just maybe use the DRS tax information to send them a check? You have the information from last year's filing.
We don't have last year's information. We have it from 2 years ago. It's dated. So what we're doing is we did send postcards to everyone who claimed it 2 years ago. DRS has sent out information to them. We're doing outreach, as the governor said, trying to get everyone in. It's a relatively simple online application with DRS. They should go to the DRS website today and check it out.
Any inkling as to why folks aren't doing it?
Couldn't say. It's out there. It's available, along with the other $600 million in taxes that tax cuts that we put out this year to help working families. We want everyone to know you should, if you're eligible for this, there are some income limits, but if you're eligible for this, you should absolutely apply. It's up to $250 per kid, up to 3 kids. It's $750 for a family of 3 kids. Everyone should apply for this.
And I'd ask all your help. We'll give you the information that people need so that make it easier for them to apply. But, you know, we've got our workforce training is opening up, the child tax credit, things where you have to, you know, you have to step up to take advantage of this. We heard this in terms of, you know, some of the support for essential workers as well, trying to get that information out.
On the, I just wanted to be clear on the 11.5 billion. Is this a savings over what period of time, or is this 11.5 billion down in the principal? Just want to understand exactly what this is.
We have Josh from the Comptroller's office here.
Who's actually our director of healthcare policy, so he has sort of been the one that's been leading the charge in our office on the pension savings and the liability issue.
Yeah, so that is over the total payback period or the amortization period that savings would accrue. So relative to all of the additional deposits that have happened, those deposits will then accrue interest over the time period, and that's less money that the state will have to pay back in its annual payments. So over the time period, it's about 24 years that we have left that we're projecting out on the amortization period.
So 11.5 billion over a period of 24 years.
Yeah.
I got you. And is it pretty much the same each year, or does it not work that way?
It's the same as the OPM secretary said. It's about $450 million savings
Per year,
Per year,
essentially.
yes.
On average.
On average.
For lack of a better term, fixed savings, the same savings each year, if I'm understanding.
On average.
On
average.
It fluctuates.
Yeah.
On average.
How would a recession affect those savings?
Well, that's part of our operating budget to make the ADAC, it's the actuarially determined employer contribution to the pension funds. We make those. What we've been talking about recently, we've been able to make extra payments. So if we don't have a surplus, we won't be able to make the extra payments, but we will continue to make the regular ADAC payments as long as we're here. That's what I'll recommend, that we continue to make those and continue on the path that we've set for bending the curve on that and paying that off over the 24-year period.
And the current year that we're in now, what surplus are we projecting? I know we're, what, 7 days into the
Current
new
year
year?
surplus for 23? It's not much.
Building 270,
For current year surplus, well, that's the revenue cap.
which is the budget surplus.
Yeah, we have an extra $279 million that we're not going to spend.
Okay.
I think on the regular operating budget, we had a small surplus. It's not we just started the fiscal year.
No, I agree, but that's why I'm asking. In other words, I know we're 7 days in, but in other words, when you created the budget,
It's in the
correct me if I'm
budget.
wrong,
It's in the budget. It's like a 19 million or something. It's a small,
19 million?
Something
like
like
a
that.
penny?
Yeah.
Okay.
it was balanced with a few dollars to spare.
Governor,
I hear you.
Governor, could you explain to us what are you seeing now that leads you to believe that there could be a recession late 2022, early 2023, and how Connecticut is positioned if that downturn materializes?
I think with the Fed belatedly stepping up and beginning to raise rates, I sort of worry they may overreact at this point. But more importantly, I think you're going to see the rise in employment beginning to slip. I think you may see that as early as tomorrow. And I think most of the markets are estimating that inflation will begin to resolve itself towards the end of this year or sooner. You already see that reflected in gas and diesel prices. It's been dramatic in the last 30 days. So I think we're beginning to worry more about recession than inflation. Recession impacts our revenues, which is why we've got those conservative assumptions.
Jeff, if we could go back to something that Jody mentioned, the tax cap on motor vehicles.
Yep.
You know, the OPM saying, you know, you're going to see your bills reduced. People are opening their bills. We're getting calls left and right, frustration.
Well, what we did is we provided $100 million of relief for the car tax. Taxpayers in this state are $100 million better off because of the proposal the governor made and the General Assembly agreed with. The car tax is a local tax, as everyone knows. Whatever you pay for your car tax is set by your local authority. They had assessments that have gotten higher because the used car market has gotten very hot recently with the supply chain and all that stuff. They could have adjusted the mill rates so that they didn't have higher taxes. In addition, we have sent an unprecedented amount of money to municipalities in recent years, as has the federal government. They have quite a bit of resources right now. Could have used some of that to defray these hikes. They raised the taxes to the extent that they're going up. That was not something the state did. And we gave them a $100 million cap, $100 million in relief for taxpayers. It would have been that much higher had we not taken that action.
So OPM is pointing to municipalities and that they could have done more.
Municipalities impose the car tax, not the state.
But people say in the cap town, they're seeing less of an increase than they might have in the 70+ cap town. Yeah, okay. And this is a result of what? The market forces raising the prices?
Yeah, believe it or not, one of the great investments in the last 2 years has been your car and a used car, and those values have gone up quite a bit. So as Jeff said, we've provided $100 million in tax relief in terms of automobiles. It certainly saved a lot of people a lot of money, not in every town, but in those towns with a certain mill rate. And I think that's what the important message is.
So for the folks who did open their bill, then you're saying it could have been higher in many cases.
Yeah, if your used car doubled in value and all we did was give you a 20% savings, I'm afraid it went up. And as Jeff said, hopefully in a lot of these towns, the mill rate went down because they're expanding grand list, including cars. Should have reduced that rate.
Governor, also your opponent, every time we talk to him, talks about using the rainy day fund for tax relief. You're not really talking about that today. Take us through that. In other words, you feel that the amount that's in the rainy day fund is the appropriate amount, and we should not be doing these tax.
Yeah, no, I do. I disagree with him profoundly on that. Last time he wanted to use the rainy day fund to pay operating expenses. Then the Senate Republicans wanted to use the rainy day fund to pay transportation expenses. Now you're saying he wants to use the rainy day fund to pay for tax cuts. The rainy day fund is there in the face of a recession to make darn sure I don't have to raise anybody's taxes or slash spending. I think it was an appropriate set aside of 15% of our revenues. Obviously in the last crash of 08, 09, it was a bigger drop than that. I think this is a buffer, it's a cushion, it's the smart thing to do for the people.
Getting back to the whole car tax thing, we spoke about this a little bit yesterday. What about the provision in the budget about depreciation? This was something that your administration was pursuing, and eventually
Yeah.
I guess it got added in at the end.
It got added, not in time for the assessors to do it for this budget cycle, unfortunately, Paul. But in the next budget cycle, they have a lot more flexibility in terms of how they want to value that used car. They can do it what they call straight line depreciation, just take 10% of the value off every year, so you don't have these spikes for some cars.
Yeah, no, I looked at the schedule after we spoke. It looks like about 5% a year till the 15th year, then it's 15 to 19.
That sounds about right.
And then $500 at the end.
That's right.
Yeah, it just takes the spikes out. That's a good thing.
But of course, people won't be seeing that election.
Correct. But they should not see these spikes in the future.
Because of this.
Exactly.
And I just think to go on that though, for folks who've seen, we've had Bill conversations that have seen these ads, where this is you're running on tax cuts, or I've done all these tax cuts, but they still see the bill. Are you pointing your finger at the municipalities? I just want to make sure. Governor, are you saying the municipalities that could have got you a cheaper bill when it comes to?
Look, there's $650 million in tax cuts. Some of that is child tax credit, some of that is earned income tax credit, some of that is property tax credit, some of that is no income tax on your pensions, and some of that is $100 million to 70 towns that have high mill rates so that their car taxes are reduced. Some people's cars doubled in value, so they're going to still see an increase in a minority of cases, but they'll see an increase. I'd like to get rid of this car tax at some point, but in the meantime, we're making it a lot more palatable for more people, and I think you'll see in those 70 towns, most of them, almost all of them, have a reduction. Anything else? Yep.
I don't know. I think the last estimate I saw from CCM was about $900 million from the car tax. Is that your understanding?
That sounds about.
Paul, do you know
About
that?
$1 billion.
Okay.
That's about right.
Yeah.
I seem to recall $1 billion was the total before we did anything, but yeah.
Okay, all right.
I'm
Thank you.
not sure, Jeff or Natalie, just in regards to the $30-ish million, the federal funds the state set up for emergency workers to help pay out essential workers, it's hardly been touched. I mean, what's your take on it? What's your hope going forward? And just explain why.
So, for us, we think that we need to do more outreach. We need to get more people to know that the program is available, how they apply for the program, what kind of documentation they need, how they apply, how they register. And we've been doing a lot of that within the last couple of months. So it's really about getting the word out and making sure that those people that had financial burden, whether or not it was because of lost wages or medical expenses or funeral expenses, that they know that they're eligible for relief from this fund. So it's really about getting the word out. Thank you to everybody here for doing that for us.
And opponents say there's a lot of red tape. Is that part of the problem? Is there a lot of hoops to jump through to qualify? Because what is it, 1 in 17?
I mean, what our agency is doing, what the comptroller's agency is doing, is administering the program that was set up by statute. And so we have to make sure, it's $34 million, we have to make sure that we verify a lot of different information. When you're talking about lost wages, we need to know how much money did you make. When you're talking about medical expenses, we need to know what was paid by the insurance and what wasn't paid by the insurance. So there is documentation that's necessary, but it's documentation that we need in order to be able to accurately calculate what the benefit is that you're going to be getting. So I wouldn't necessarily call it red tape. I mean, there's a process, and there's a process that you have to go through to do it. You know, part of the issue is since January, we've only gotten 1,700 applications. So what we need, even if we processed every single one of those applications, we need to get more people applying to the program because, you know, again, folks had financial hardships associated with contracting COVID, and we want to make sure that they get the monies to make them whole.
How much, if any, has been paid out?
We have, I don't know if we have the exact number, about 300,000 has been paid out, approximately,
Out of 34 million.
out of 34 million.
Their date's been extended, is that correct? For anyone who's
The date's
watching?
been extended to the end of the year, so December, you have until December to apply for the program.
How do you apply?
And we have a website that's set up, ctew.org,
CT.
essentialworkers.org. There we go.
Maybe that can be
That
simplified.
could be simplified. But it's a very easy step-by-step process that you go through online. We have paper applications that are available. If there are trade organizations, manufacturing organizations, community organizations that want our office to come out and explain sort of the process and run through it and talk about eligibility, our office is more than willing to do that. We've done that in a variety of scenarios already. So, you know, it's really about getting the word out to people.
Comptroller, this is different from the pandemic pay program, correct? And what's
Correct.
the status of that?
So we have the premium pay program that is another $30 million that our office is going to administer. And that is basically, you don't have to have contracted COVID at all. It's just that you qualify as an essential worker. We're in the process of setting up the portal right now. We anticipate that it'll be set up and live and ready to go the end of July, the beginning of August. So we're in the process of getting that done right now.
Secretary Beckham, where do we stand in terms of the negotiations with state employee unions regarding the ARPA funds that have been set aside for pandemic pay and those kinds of?
They've just commenced, last couple of weeks.
Okay. And as I recall, there's no timing, right?
No,
At what point might, you know, it head to arbitration if the negotiations, is there any kind of estimate of that? You can't negotiate a deal.
I don't talk about negotiations that are underway and make predictions about timeframes.
I only say because the unions.
You can
have put
always
out-
make an exception,
The
it's fine.
unions have put out a statement, previously put out a statement,
Yeah.
they expected arbitration this summer. Here we are, it's July.
Okay. They're free to make whatever comments they like. I have the other side of the table, and I'm going to keep my own counsel on that.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you. See you guys.